Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen O'Connor from Quilters Heaven in Northbrook, Illinois, and I am the Opinionated Quilter. Today's episode, number 98, is how to take a pattern written years ago, the way we used to quilt, and turn it into a new pattern. I should say not a new pattern. Change it so that you can use the new techniques to make the same pattern. But before we get to that, let's get to my opinion. I got a new shipment from Moda, and they always have sales flyers in it. And there's a new glow ruler. I showed you the square glow ruler some time ago. This is the 6 by 24, I should say 6.5 by 24 ruler, which to me, if you only had one ruler, that's the ruler you need. Let's compare the prices. Now, there are other brands of rulers. The two we carry in the store are the Creative Grids and the Quilter Select. So to me, this ruler is your most basic ruler. It's the one you need to cut the strips from that's long enough to get across the width of the fabric, at least as off the bolt, folded in half. So let's look at the Creative Grids. The 6.5 by 24.5 inch ruler is MSRP of $33.99. That in itself is not cheap. The good news is that it does take you a while to wear out these rulers. You buy it once and you have it for several years until you nick it up too much. The Quilter Select, you know we love those because they don't move. It helps you really cut accurately. I know some of my viewers don't care for them for that exact reason, that they don't move. So it is truly personal preference. I thought these were pricey. Theirs is a 6.5 by 24, MSRP $56.99. The Glow Ruler, which isn't actually out till June, is a 6.5 by 24 also. Check out that price, $90.99. That's $57 more than the Creative Grids. You could buy both of these for the price of the Glow Ruler. In my opinion, too much money. Yes, it gives you light. If you really have bad vision and you've got lights all around you and you still can't see, maybe there might be a person that this ruler is worth $90, but in my book, way too expensive. Now, let's get to today's episode. This pattern, Stars Around the Garden, was in our sale bin. It was written in 2005. It's an old pattern, and my employee pulled it out and decided she wanted to make it. And it's a block of the month. So the first thing she did was open it up and say, I want to make this. And I looked at the instructions, and the first thing I said was, well, I wouldn't do it that way. I would do it the Deb Tucker way. And later she came to me and said, she couldn't figure out what size to cut the pieces to do the newer methodology from the way the pattern was written with the older methodology. So we decided that I would show you how to do that through a couple of these blocks, and then you could use that knowledge to change patterns for yourself. If you find an old pattern that you really like, but it doesn't use any of the newer methods. And it's not hard to do. You just have to break it down into units. So the first thing I do is I pull out the Deb Tucker rulers that I might be using. And then that will help me with the measurements. So in this example, this is month 1, block 1. And I hope you can see that they've got quarter square triangle units. Here, it's only made up of 3 different units. These 4 patches, these quarter square triangles, and this center square. And the first thing they do tell you the cutting. And it tells you to cut individual 2.5-inch squares for these. It tells you to cut a larger square and then cut them twice on the diagonal to make the quarter square triangle units. And obviously this is just going to be a square. But what size are you going to do? Well, we know they're all 12.5-inch unfinished blocks to finish to 12. So that tells you when you have 9 squares that each square finishes to 4 inches and has to be 4.5 inches. So the only thing I'm cutting the same is the center square, which tells you to cut it at 4.5. Now, the 4 patches, why would you cut 8 individual 2.5-inch squares of one color and 8 2.5-inch squares of the other color? If you've been doing any kind of strip piecing and using the 2.5-inch measurement, you know that from one full width of fabric, you get 16 2.5-inch squares. So that means with a half a width of fabric, you can get your 8 units to make these up. So the first thing I do is I take a strip of my background fabric, a strip of, I think that's number 3 fabric, and then sew them together and cut in 2.5-inch increments, and then put them together and make 4 patches. And they should measure exactly 4.5 inches square so that it will finish to 4. Simple. Where numbers change a little bit is in the olden days, they used real accurate measurements so that each extra cut you take, you're prone to, or open to, I should say, open to making a slight mistake. You could be a hair one way, a hair the other way. You could cut these squares into your triangles and not have them all be exactly the same size. The thing that Deb Tucker has done is she adds in some wiggle room. She has you cut bigger. So rather than follow the measurements that they tell you there, I go to my rulers and instructions. And in this case, it would be the Tucker trimmer. And I say, what size square do I need to cut to get a 4-inch finished? And you go to her chart and she will tell you whether it's a 4-inch finished, a 5.5-inch finished, a 6-inch finished. All the numbers you need are in the chart. And then you take the chart of what you're going to cut and you change it up here for yourself. Write it down so that you know what you want to cut. And then to make them, you need 2 squares of the floral, because there's 2 quarter squares in there of the floral. You need 1 square of the light blue and 1 square of the background. Now, I didn't use the same fabrics down here. This is just representative, 2 of the one and 1 each of the other. And then you put the main one, the one you have 2 of, you pair 1 with the background and 1 with the other. And you go ahead like you always do and either draw a line down the center or draw a line 1/4 inch apart. So on both sides of the line so that you end up with 2 half square triangles of each combination. And then you take, let's see, I have one of these marked somewhere. This one's marked. Well, I can't find my mark. How about that? You take 1 half square triangle of one combination and 1 of the other combination. And then you just, and this is all in the instructions too. You don't have to get this from me. It's all in the instructions in the ruler. but you'll put together like this. So now this one is paired with the one that there's two of. The background is paired with the floral. And then you do the same thing. Oh, here, it's marked here. You draw your line corner to corner, sew on either side, and that's how you get your quarter square triangles that look like this. Very easy to do. Very, very easy to do. I have another example to show you. I'll be right back. This is the same pattern. This is block 3, month 1, I believe. And again, it's a 12-inch block. So now you have to figure out what the finished sizes of all of these are. So if it's a 12-inch block, we know this is 6. The flying geese units, it's always the long side is double the short side. So this has to be 3. This has to be 6. So they're 3 by 6 finished. And then these are 3-inch squares. And you know then if you add 3 plus 6 plus 3 gets you your 12. So we know our measurements are right. What we're not going to do is do the measurements they tell you in the directions, because they're too small. They give you no wiggle room. You want to make them bigger, and you're going to know what sizes to make by pulling out your instructions. I look at this and I see flying geese. So if it's flying geese, I need my wing clipper. And the square and a square, I need Deb's square and a square ruler. So I've got those both out. And the first thing it tells you to do is cut this at 4 3/4. Now, that is really, really close to what the measurement on the Deb Tucker ruler comes to. So in this case, if you used the measurement to cut that center square, you would really be fine. But I would always double check. Deb's rulers always have, oh, I should have a white piece of paper behind it, but there's lines on the ruler. There's lines on the ruler that tell you how big that center square should be. Here we go. So this ruler covers 6 sizes. So you can see, I'm hoping you can see it, the smallest size here out to 6 inches out here. And I always use this ruler to check if the size that they tell you to cut is correct. In this case, it's really pretty spot on, but for many sizes, it's not. So you'd always want to double check. And the other reason to have this ruler and use this ruler is on this half of the ruler, it lets you lay the ruler on top of the finished unit, and it's got X's where the triangles on the outside meet, so you can get it perfectly square with an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, so that when you do sew it into the unit, you don't lose any points. So the one thing that I wouldn't follow is the size they tell you to cut these triangles here. They tell you to cut squares and cut them in half diagonally and make half square triangles, not quarters, excuse me, half square triangles. I would not follow that number. I would use the number that Deb tells you to make in her ruler. And why would you do that? It gives you extra wiggle room. It's bigger. You don't have to sew them on absolutely perfectly to get a perfect result. So I would immediately change the size of this half square triangle to be what Deb tells you to do. Then you can sew them on, just centering them as best you can with your eyes. And then you use the ruler you lay it on here to square these up. And you end up with a perfect square and a square. Now the harder one to do was these flying geese, because we of course always want to do the 4 flying geese method. They had you cut quarter square triangles, sew them together, and then sew them together onto the quarter square triangle of background fabric. I didn't want to do that. That leaves too much possibility for screwing up. So what I did was I was saying that they're about the same size. I cut one, going back a step here, for the center squares. I cut this with a regular ruler, 4 3/4, and I cut this with Deb Tucker's ruler, and they're like identical. So that's why I put them up on the board. Just forgot to mention it. Let me move this up so you can see it better. Like I said, wanted to do the 4 at a time. And the way that I figured out how to do that was by making half square triangles to be my squares to put on here. Now, if you've not done the 4 at a time method, many people use it. It's in many books. I've told before that I saw it originally in a Quilter's Newsletter magazine about 1999, 2000. Some shop in Florida did it. But the directions on Deb's wing clipper is, to me, the best that are out there. So I made half square triangles that I wanted to finish to 4 inches. And how I know did I want them to finish to 4 inches is because that's what Deb tells me here I need for my squares to finish my flying geese to 3 by 6. So I made these, and then I just put them on here just like the directions tell you to. And this square is cut to Deb's dimensions as well, not what they tell you here. She oversizes. So you then take this to the sewing machine, sew on both sides of the lines, cut it apart, and then you have 2 more of these and put them on the 2 remaining corners of these that are cut apart, which would be here and here. If you just follow the directions, they'll come out perfectly. Once I get them cut and pressed, I get 4 perfect flying geese. The key is you have to have these come straight into the corner. You need your 1/4 inch seam allowance up here. They all come out perfect. You trim them with your wing clipper ruler, and they will all be perfect. And it's as easy as that. These are all ones, this whole pattern are ones that are written just cutting your square strips, half square triangles, quarter square triangles. There's also patterns that go back further that give you templates for squares. We're not going to use cardboard templates to make squares. We're going to use our updated rulers and tools. It's really easy if you just break it down into units and you pull out your tools that are the correct tool for the job. Please let me know what you think about this methodology. You know, I love it, but I'd like to hear what you think too. That's today's episode. Please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, happy sewing.